Hello crafty friends, and welcome to the second video in this wobbly circle stencil mini series of videos. In the last video I used pigment powders with this wobbly circle stencil. In the next video I'm going to do some heat embossing with it, but in this video I did some masking and some pasting. So let's start with the masking. I took some masking paper. This is just sticker paper that's relatively low tack, so it's easy to peel off when you're finished with it. I put some mixed media paper on my grip mat, tore my masking paper to give me some raggedy edges, and then I stuck it down onto my mixed media paper, and then I inked the gap between the two pieces of masking paper. I used spun sugar to start with. This is a very pale pink, so I rubbed my ink pad on the paper and then blended it on. I find with these paler inks it's helpful to apply a lot of ink to start with by rubbing the ink pad on the paper, and then you can just intensify it a bit with blending. Once I was happy with the blending, I brought in my stencil. And then I stenciled on some wax resist. So the theory with the wax resist is that you can apply it to any kind of paper and then you can ink over the top of it, but obviously the ink won't stick to the resist, it will just stick to the surrounding paper. A bit like emboss resist, but it's just a wax you can apply. So I did the resist through the stencil, and once I'd done that, I blended on some picked raspberry, which is a darker pink. And the resist did work to some degree. I'm going to try this again and try and tweak the process because it wasn't as resisty as I'd hoped it would be. If you look closely, you can see lighter circles where the wax is, but it wasn't obvious enough. So what I did next was bring in some Seedless Preserves Distress Oxide, which is a more saturated version, a darker version of picked raspberry, and I blended that through the smaller wobbly circles. To bring in a bit of shimmer and shine, I splattered on some pink metallic watercolour paint. And before removing the masking paper, I made sure everything was dry, so I blasted it with my hairdryer. This has the advantage of softening the adhesive on the back of the masking paper as well, so it makes it easier to remove and reduces the risk of tearing the card panel underneath. So I set this panel off to one side and decided to use up the rest of the ink that was on my stencil. So I spritzed it with some DIY shimmer spray. This has just got white pearl pigment powder in it, so it sort of makes everything pearly. And then I flipped the stencil over and pressed it down onto another piece of card. When I removed the stencil, I was left with a lovely, delicate, subtle, wobbly circle pattern that had a lot of shimmer and shine as well as colour to it. There was still some ink left on the stencil, so I got out a couple of texture paste. I've got an embellishment mousse from Nuvo here in powder blue, and I put some of that through the stencil. And in the areas where I didn't add the powder blue, I added some Ranger translucent texture paste, so this will dry clear. But because there's ink on the stencil still, the texture paste picked this up as I spread it across the stencil and ended up a nice light pink colour. So when I removed the stencil, I had a variegated pattern of metallic light blue and glossy pale pink. I had a bit of the pink texture paste left on my palette knife, so I spread that on another panel. So what I'm going to do now is take one of the panels and make a card for you on camera. Then I'll use the other ones off camera and come back at the end of the video and show you all the cards that I made with these backgrounds. So I decided to use the masked blended panel for this card. And I die cut out a strip of gold card. This is matte gold card, not too shiny. And I use white glue to stick that on top of the blended panel over to the left hand side a bit. I then cut the whole thing down with a stitched rectangle die and use tape runner to attach the die cut panel onto my card blank. For For my focal point, I thought I would die cut out a heart, so I die cut the heart from the other panel that I created by spritzing the stencil and pressing it down onto card. I popped this up on some foam tape and stuck it in the bottom left hand corner on the intersection of the grid lines there, the third up from the bottom and the third in from the left. For my sentiment, I chose a scripty I love you, and I die cut that from the same gold that I'd used for the strip. And to finish it off, I added a cascade of small gold hearts that I die cut using the smallest die from the heart nesting dies that I used to create the focal point heart from. Right, here's the card that you saw me make. Very happy with that. I only used a little bit of this panel, so that's going to go in my box of backgrounds and bits to be used at a future date. This is the card that I made using the texture paste panel. So I cut it down into a rectangle, mounted it on a piece of linen textured white cardstock, and then I stuck it on the linen textured card blank, but I pushed it right to the top so that it's coming in from that top line there. There's no border at the top, and it's centered on this third line here. I then added a vellum doily. It's got little hearts all the way around the outside, and that was to help my sentiment stand out. So I die cut out a gold happy birthday and stuck that on, and then I added some gold circles to bring in that energy and movement and a sense of flow. So that's quite gentle and pastel. And this is the card that I made with the other texture paste bit, the bit that I had left over and I just scraped through. I thought it would make a nice little foundation spot for a die cut. So I die cut out this hanging basket. I do want to put a bit of thread there and tuck it underneath the panel so it looks like it's hanging from something. So this is just some very pale champagne gold card with a bit of pink. I used, I think, Pick Raspberry to colour some card so that it toned in with the pink here, added some foliage and a just for you sentiment. So that's a little crop of cards and a leftover bit of background. I hope you enjoyed watching this card come together, and I hope the other cards have given you some ideas too. If you have enjoyed the video, please do consider leaving a thumbs up, let me know in the comments, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and I'll see you back here in a couple of days for the last in this little mini series. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.